Hugh, as you all know, many of you know, he's incredibly well known as a local historian, particularly as a military historian. He was single-handedly, along with a number of others, pretty much, put together the extensive list of Longford people who were involved in the Great War. And he is in the background also working on a number of other conflicts where Longford people were involved, including the Napoleonic Wars. And also, of course, the Second World War, which we are going to discuss this evening. So Hugh is going to give an audiovisual presentation, and I'll hand you over to him now.
Good evening, everyone. You're all very welcome to this presentation. As I said, during Heritage Week, many different historic events are recalled, discussed, and analysed. Last evening, for instance, in the village of Ballinallee, there was an excellent walk and talk on the War of Independence, the events leading up to it, and the events after it. And two experts that gave the talk were Bernard Sexton and Father Tom Murray. And after the Free State came into being, I was wondering myself, how would Britain fare if they got involved in another huge war, like World War I? In World War I, 250,000 Irishmen took part. So just 17 years after independence, the big test came again. And how would the Irish react? This time, both the Fianna Fáil government of the day, Sinn Féin and others, were very much against any Irish participation in a war. Also, the country was neutral, so there was a great excuse for Irish people not to bother. But as we'll see, that isn't what happened. The relationship between Ireland and Britain has always been fairly complex, but Irish people tend to make up their own minds as to what they should do, and such was the case during World War II. A large number of Irish citizens willingly went to Britain during that time, some to work and many others to join the armed forces. Total figures on Irish volunteers and war workers remain uncertain, but the number of new travel permits, identity cards and passports issued to men and women in 1940 and 1945 was in the region of 200,000. To this should be added the 45,000 which the Department of External Affairs estimated went to the UK between September 1939 and the fall of France in June 1940. And you must remember the population of the Republic of Ireland at this stage was 3 million. Some 70,000 citizens of Ireland served in the British Armed Forces during the war, together with another 50,000 from Northern Ireland. Many veterans, an estimated 5,000, had deserted from the Irish Army to join the British and fight Hitler. And they faced potentially severe punishment when they returned home. Indeed, many of them weren't pardoned until a couple of years ago. The Irish volunteers went to fight in all theatres of the war and served in every branch of the armed forces as seamen in the Battle of the Atlantic and on the Arctic convoys to Russia, as aircrew in the Battle of Britain and the bomber offensive against Germany. They went as soldiers to Europe, Africa and Asia. In Longford, we still have to research World War II, but we know a number from this county were killed in action. Others died from wounds and other causes. Those that died included leading aircraft woman Kathleen Monaghan from Drumlesh. She's actually buried in Drumlesh. Charles and Patrick Baxter, Joseph and Thomas Robinson from Keena, both died on January the 20th, 1942, when the Marrow was sunk by a U-boat. Robert Flower, a native of Barry, joined the Royal Navy in 1940 and served until his death on the 31st of March 1942. He was aged 21 years. He's buried in Singapore. Private Thomas Francis Donlan died and is buried in Libya. His father John died in the First World War and he's buried abroad as well. So now I'm just going to name some of the people from Longford that took part in the Second World War. And the first one we're going to is Sean Dermody. You can see an image of him on the screen there. He was born in Dring, Port, near Granard in County Longford in 1921. His parents were John Dermody and Rose Doherty. He joined the Irish Army around 1938 and he was soon promoted to a sergeant. He and some of his comrades deserted in 1940 and enlisted in the British forces. In 1943, Paddy, as he was known by the British, served with the Chindits in the steam and jungles of Burma. He was an invaluable member of the group. Not alone was he an exceptional jungle fighter, his expertise in equine matters was indispensable, as the Chindits depended on mules and ponies mostly for their transportation. He served under his brother Bernard's name. When he joined up, he went in as Bernard Dermody. And Brigadier Mike Calvert, his commanding officer in Burma and author of Fighting Mad, stated that in 1940, Paddy decided the British needed a bit of strengthening from the Irish and marched his whole platoon onto the boat for Liverpool, where they all volunteered for the local regiment. Now, how much truth is in Mike Calvert's statement, we don't know, but we do know that Paddy did go to Liverpool and join the Liverpool regiment. Soon he became part of the famous Chindits. The Chindits, known officially as the Long Range Penetration Groups, were special operation units of the British and Indian armies, which saw action in 1943 and 1944 during the Burma campaign of World War II. There were the creation of British Army Brigadier Ord Charles Wingate, were formed parading operations against the Imperial Japanese Army, deep behind Japanese lines. And Sean Dermody, known affectionately, as we said, as Paddy, to his army comrades, served on Operation Longcloth during February to May 1943 as Brigadier Wingate's groom, journeying alongside the Chindit commander in his brigade headquarters. He was one of the very few other ranked soldiers to take part in both Chindit expeditions. In 1944, he became groom to newly promoted Brigadier Mike Calvert. Indeed, he was very well known and trusted by both Wingate and Calvert. He entered Burma for a second time on the 5th of March 1944. And he was never far from Brigadier Calvert's side during the early months of Operation Thursday, which the second Chindit expedition was known of. He was with him as 77 brigades set up the defences for the first Chindit stronghold at Broadway and fought alongside his commander at Pagoda Hill on the 13th of March 1944. This action against the Japanese, who were defending a 70-foot hill at a place called Henu, ended in a bloody and almost medieval hand-to-hand battle with the enemy, in which no quarter was given or indeed asked for by either side. As Calvert went forward to see what damage the Japs had done, he was accompanied by Corporal Young and Dermody. They had named one of the hills Bear Hill because most of the trees on the slopes had been cut down. And as they went up, Sean shouted, "Look out," to Calvert and gave him a shove. At the same time, he fell himself badly wounded. He was shot in the groin. Calvert charged round a trunk tree and emptied his revolver into a wounded Jap who had fired at him. and Young and Calvert carried Dermody down to the dressing station. Sean was left in the care of 2 doctors, and soon after he was flown to hospital. But Corporal Sean Dermody died of wounds on the 6th of July 1944, and it was probably at the 47 British General Hospital in Calcutta. He's buried under his brother's name. I think we have you can see it there on the screen, in Calcutta, in Boantor Cemetery. And Calcutta is now Kolkata, India. There can be no doubt that Sean Dermody was a special and much-loved character and an exceedingly brave man. It's not often that a corporal receives mention in the British Army War Diary, and less still in later books about the campaign in which he fought. And Sean features in both these sets of writing, not once but many times. 2 books I have here with me, he's mentioned in both of those books. This March or Die by Philip D. Chinnery and Fighting Mad, One Man's Guerrilla War by Mike Calvert. Both of those mention him very fondly and remember him. I'd just like to thank Thomas Martin O'Connor for his information on his granduncle Sean Dermody. The next man we're going to talk about was a Frenchman that made his home in Longford in later years. His name was Roger Caron. And Roger Caron was born at San Colomba in Seine-et-Marne in July 1919. Don't mind my French pronunciation, it's not the best. Where his father, Louis Caron, was an electrician. His mother was Jean Mallard. He was educated in Lille. At the age of 20, he joined the French Navy and was stationed in Dakar when World War II started. By the time France collapsed under the German onslaught, he was in Alexandria. He deserted from the Navy to join de Gaulle's Free French Army in September 1942. He joined the first company of Marine Fusiliers Commandos. And on Christmas Eve in 1943, Master Marine Pierre Walrand, with Roger as second in command, led a Franco commando party from Dover. They landed on the beach near Gravelines in occupied France, and their task was to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the German defences and let the enemy believe that the D-Day landings could take place on these shores. They landed safely, but when they returned to the small dory or boat, they found it swamped. Tragically, Pierre Walrand drowned, and Roger and his men had no choice but to make their way inland. They became separated. Some, including Roger, managed to contact the French resistance and so avoided capture. At the end of January 1944, he obtains false identity papers at Lille, and he joined the Kiefer Commando Group in October 1944 and was present at the landing in Holland. During the street fighting for the capture of Vissy-Gen on November 1st, 1944, while he and his group occupied the first floor of a house, without fear of exposure to heavy fire from the enemy, he took on a full German section that counterattacked and inflicted heavy losses on them. For this action, he was awarded a citation for bravery in Holland. After some more service in Germany, he retired with the rank of Sergeant Major. He was afterwards hospitalised and was in hospital for D-Day. He was awarded the Vermeil Star with Palm and the Medal Military. After the war, he went to Wales, where he met his wife, Kitty Lennon from Balnamuck, who were married in Wales, and returned to Longford, where they opened a restaurant on Great Water Street in 1955, which they managed with Kitty's sister. This was a very successful venture for many years, and it was a very popular venue for locals and visitors alike. In 1975, after 20 years in business, Roger and his wife Kitty decided to sell up and retire. After they retired, they were involved in many local organisations in Longford, like the community games, the rugby club, St Joseph's Hospital, and other concerns kept them active. Roger died on February the 6th, 1978, at a relatively young age of 59 years. Fittingly, he is buried in Balnamuck, close to the site of the last great land battle in Ireland, where his countrymen, the French, stood shoulder to shoulder with the Irish rebels in 1798 on Shanmulla Hill. Kitty Caron died in October 1990 and is interred beside her husband. In Gravesline each December, those events related above and those that took part are commemorated. And my thanks to Bruno Doris, who has written extensively about this historic episode in World War II and has shared his findings with me. His book, Operation Hardtack, Raid on Graveslines, is a richly documented book that details the raid, while profiling the lives of the commandos before and after the event. Bruno Doris also invited anyone from Longford that ever wants to go to this commemoration. They're very welcome. It's held in December, as I said, each year. The next soldier we're going on to was a young man who joined the Air Corps, Warrant Officer Kieran Connolly. Kieran was the son of MP Connolly, and he was born in Keena, County Longford. He joined the Royal Air Force in 1938, and he may have seen action in Europe early in the war. Kieran and his squadron were involved in the defence of Singapore before it fell to the Japanese, and afterwards in the evacuation. Their planes were old Wildebeest and Brewster Buffaloes, and were no match for the Mitsubishi A6M0 planes belonging to the Japanese. Kieran was captured by the Japanese Navy on the 12th of July 1942. He spent most of his captivity moving from camp to camp along the notorious Burma Railway. Kieran Connolly died on the 12th of August 1945 in Ta Rua camp in Thailand, just 3 days before Japan surrendered. This month is the 76th anniversary of this brave soldier's death. He is remembered in Chung Hai War Cemetery, Thailand, close to the Burma Railway. Now, Kieran came from a family that many were in the services, but his father was an old IRA veteran and had been interred in Ballykindler during the War of Independence. And indeed, Kieran is related to the chairperson of the Longford Historical Society, Camilla Kelly. The next person we're talking about is a D-Day veteran, and it's Robert Miller, and Robert is from the same parish as myself. He was from Legan. And in the month of June, 75 years ago, this man pictured was one of those that took part in the D-Day landings. Robert Miller, always known as Bertie, was a native of Legan parish in County Longford. He survived the war. His brother Willie, who spent 3 years in a Japanese prisoner of war camp alongside the Burma Railway, also survived. Willie Miller died in 1995 and Bertie died in 2004, and both of them are interred in Kilglass Churchyard in Legan. The next man we're going on to was also with the Air Corps, but he was an aircraft mechanic, and he was a great friend of mine, Freddie Brady Brown. and Freddie was born in County Clare in 1922 to Captain Thomas Brady Brown of Ballyslattery and Mabel Frances Main, a daughter of Surgeon Nathaniel Main of the Infirmary Longford. Freddie joined the RAF in 1938, and soon after he was posted to Egypt. He served there for the remainder of the war. He served in Cairo and Alexandria, and with his fellow aircraft maintenance crews, kept the planes flying until Hitler and Germany were finally defeated. After the war in 1947, he moved to Longford, where he started selling suits. And this just kept him going until one day on the streets of Longford, a man offered him 10 schoolgirls' coats. He told me he was reluctant to sell second-hand clothes, but was amazed at how strong the demand for them was. And soon after, he opened a shop on the corner of Water Street and Main Street, one many of you will remember, where he sold Army and Navy surplus, as well as all the second-hand clothes. Freddie was very active in the British Legion and visited veterans of World War I and World War II as a representative of that organisation. He also attended parades on Remembrance Days with many other veterans and sold poppies to raise funds. One of life's gentlemen, Freddie Brady Brown, passed away on December the 5th, 2010, and he's interred in St. John's Churchyard, Longford. And as I said, I met him on several occasions. I think I met him first around 2005. I called to his house and he gave me that photograph that you see there, but he also gave me all the military photographs he had in the house of his father. And as I was leaving, he said to me, "What's your name?" And I said to him, "You mean you're giving me all this stuff and you haven't a clue who I am?" He said, "You look trustworthy." So he was really a gentleman. The next man we're going on to is Flight Lieutenant Frederick William Park. And William Park was a doctor. And William is standing second from left with his parents and siblings. His parents are buried in St. John's. When we were in, Luke Baxter and myself were in doing the book No Stone Unturned, we came across their grave. And I was wondering about the family, and it was through a bit of research that we discovered that he was in the Second World War. And he was born in Longford, and he was born in Longford Town in 1915, and he served in the RAF Voluntary Reserve during World War II. He was a young doctor when he enlisted for the duration of the war, and then he was posted to the Far East. Along with many others, he was captured in 1942 by the Japanese army. His time in captivity, with very few resources at his disposal, was spent looking after the welfare of his fellow soldiers and treating a whole range of illnesses, from cholera to beriberi and numerous other tropical diseases. He spent time in Hintok River Camp at Hellfire Pass near the River Kwai in Thailand, Shanghai Camp in Singapore, and Konkayata. Konkayata would become the focal point of the cholera outbreak that spread throughout the camps, carried by prisoners of war passing through on their way north. It was in Konkayata in late October 1943 that the Thai and Burmese ends of the infamous Burma Railway finally met. 16,000 Allied prisoners and some 80,000 local inhabitants died in the course of the construction. Frederick Park marched through many miles of steaming hot jungle terrain, caring for those that were ill, the dying, both day and night without respite. When the camps were liberated, although he was very ill, he refused to leave his patients until he saw their welfare was in the hands of capable physicians. He was awarded an OBE by King George VI in 1946, and he died on the 5th of July 1985 at his home in Worcestershire. And the final man that I'm covering on this today is an old friend of mine as well, Mickey Riley. And Mickey was born in Longford Town in February 1924. And as he was growing up, he was surrounded by veterans of World War I, most of them members of his own family and extended family. His father, John, served with the Leinster Regiment in the war. And Michael Riley, his uncle, served with the Connacht Rangers and was shot in battle in 1915. And it took him out of the war for a while. He was treated for the wound, but was soon back in the thick of the fighting. For the next 10 years, he complained of a pain in his chest. And in 1925, Dr. Mary Farrell discovered a bullet was lodged in his heart. And he was sent to Dublin and then to London to have it removed. He became famous as the soldier that survived with a bullet in his heart. He lived for another 19 years, and he died in Legion Terrace in 1944. Mickey himself was too young when World War II started in 1939, but in 1941, just 17 years old, he headed to Northern Ireland to enlist. He was sent to England, where he joined the 10th Battalion of the Sherwood Foresters. This unit was raised for home defence only, and it was disbanded in 1941, soon after Mickey joined. He did the rest of his training in Scotland with the regular 5th Battalion of the Northamptonshire Regiment, and he sailed to North Africa aboard RMS Orion on October 15, 1942, to take part in Operation Torch. He arrived on November the 8th, which was right in the middle of the Second Battle of El Alamein. This was some baptism of fire for those young men, and they would have witnessed some terrible scenes. Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, took place in July 1943, and every yard of ground was hard fought over, and must be remembered that those were the only Allied troops in Europe at that time. The Normandy landings took place a year later, in 1944. Mickey and his battalion landed in Italy on the 22nd of September 1943 to take part in Operation Avalanche, and again every yard was contested. On the 17th of January to the 18th of May 1944, the Battle of Monte Cassino was fought, and his battalion was also involved. Over 70,000 men died there, including many of Mickey's comrades. During this battle, he got separated from his company and was listed as missing, presumed dead, and was prayed for in Longford. When the battle and confusion finished, he rejoined his unit, much to the relief of his family in Longford. In July 1944, they returned to Egypt to re-equip, and then back to Italy, where they remained until May the 8th, 1945. And they then crossed into Austria, where they remained until hostilities ceased. When the war was over, Mickey returned to Longford and worked at various jobs. In 1948, he married the love of his life, Roseanne, and together they raised their family in very difficult times. Mickey worked with Longford County Council for many years and was well known for his helpful and cheerful outlook. He was an honorary member of the Peter Keenan branch of ONET Longford, a fact he was very proud of. And when he died, he was laid out in the uniform of this organisation. So these are just a few of those that fought in World War II. No records of those soldiers are on general release so far, but as to come into the public domain over the next few years, they will be added to our website here in Longford, WWW Longford at War.ie, which can be viewed online and contains the names of many of those that took part in World War One, the Irish War of Independence, and the Easter Rising. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugh. That turned out really, really well. It was so interesting. It's a huge amount of information. Some of the men, a lot of us knew quite well. I'd met Freddie, Brady Brown, and Mickey Riley. I think at the first time I met you, which was your In Foreign Fields exhibition, which I just looked online, was all the way back in 2008.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks very much, Hugh, for that. That was absolutely fantastic. I'm interested that some of the men you covered were in the Far East. Do you know of any other Longford men? I know that the ones that you spoke about are the ones that you have details of, but are there any other Longford men that you know of who are in the Far East and maybe need a bit more researching?
Yeah, there was. There was a man from Caron. He was killed in Burma as well. He was buried in Turkey in India.
Right.
And Frankie Smith, I don't know whether you remember Frankie.
I do indeed. I do indeed. I think some of his family are with us.
He was in the Far East.
Emer O'Mara.
Hi, yes. My dad was Frankie Smith.
Is that right? Yeah.
So I have his war record, but so I would love to send a copy to you. Maybe you could tell me a bit more about.
Well, we'd love to see his war record. I often spoke to Frankie. I remember him well. And one time he told me he was in Burma. He just mentioned it once.
Yeah, he was in Burma. He didn't talk very much about actually, bar that he would show us the planes, and he talked briefly, but not. He didn't tend to talk very much. I think maybe he's seen too much.
No. Most of the soldiers of Sarah weren't inclined to talk too much about it. And your father would be no exception. But they went through a lot, especially in the Far East.
We have two chat comments come in. The first is from Jen Butler. And she says, thank you for a very informative presentation, Hugh. I have a keen interest in World War II, as both of my grandfathers served in the South African Allied Forces, the North Africa Corps, France and Italy. She's just asking, what are the titles of the books that you mentioned earlier?
One of the books is Fighting Mad by Mike Calvert. Mike Calvert was the commander of the second Shindig expedition. And the other one is March or Die. It's by Philip D. Chinnery. And the photograph on the cover is of a lieutenant of the Manchester Regiment that received a Victoria Cross at Pagoda Hill.
And then another question from an EJW is, could you please explain what you meant by records being released soon? Also, do you know of any men who were POWs in Japan? I have been hoping to find diaries of any men who were, as my father was with the Canadian Army.
Yeah, what I meant by records released is I'd say it would be another few years before the World War II records are online. At the moment, World War I is all on it, all right. And as for other POWs, if you get in contact with me, I have the name of several POWs, including Willie Miller. There was a Cullen man died in the Japanese prison camps. There was a footballer from Sligo, played with Longford Town. He died in the camps. So there's plenty.
No, it's a really fascinating subject. I mean, I know that we're almost World War One out at this stage, even though you were saying the other day more people are coming up. And I think with this, we know that there have to be quite a few, because especially with the US Army, because if you went over, there's a good for any number of years, there's a good chance that they became citizens, and then they were conscripted or they joined up willingly. So we do know that they were likely there, and bit by bit the information is coming out. It no more than the Great War records, there is a complication with the US records in that they also had a big archival fire in the 60s, and we know that quite a few of the Great War records are gone. I think some of the World War II ones have as well. So they're in different repositories, and states as well kept their own. And bit by bit they are coming online. And then there's a lot of searching through newspapers and that. But you know, if you have anybody who is connected, such as yourselves, we're certainly interested in hearing if they have a Longford connection. So if they were born here, if they lived here for a appreciable amount of time, or they passed away here, we are certainly interested. I'm going to just share my screen again for one moment, just to show the website that Hugh mentioned earlier. So this is longford@war.ie. Yep, I'm just double checking it's coming up on the screen. And this is a repository of military personnel and also civilians who were involved in various conflicts around the world, or who passed away as a result of a conflict. So during the Great War, we have a number of civilians and non-combatants who died in the sinking of the RMS Leinster. We also have Easter Rising people, as Hugh mentioned, and we are adding in other conflicts. As the more we're looking, the more we're finding that wherever you go in the world, if there was some sort of international schmozzle, there was a good chance there was a Longford man somewhere involved. But we don't know everybody. We don't necessarily have all the information. We verify as much as we can. We do try and use this as a genealogical resource. So if they turn up in the 1901 or 1911 census, we include a link there, for example. But if there is additional information, we would love to get that. And the best way of doing that is, if you just look here, you'll see submit information. If you click on that, this form will come up. And we would really appreciate if you could give us as much information as you know about the person or their family as possible. So name, surname, the townland that they came from would be really helpful. Also, if you knew what country they lived in or they served in, the war that they served in. So you just type that in all the way down. You don't have to fill in everything, but if you can fill in as much as you can, the information will go here. And if you could include your own name and contact details, such as an email address, in the notes section, that would be incredibly helpful. And if it was a direct relative of yours, if you know the name of the parents of that soldier, that would be incredibly helpful, because it then helps us find the right people, and then we can put up the correct information. And then down here we have a number of conflicts that we're likely to see a Longford person in. If you're not sure, there is another button, and there is also for those who were in the British Army, just in general, as there is a strong tradition in the county going back a number of centuries. And then just when we mentioned showing you this image, it's included in Flickr, the Longford Library Flickr account. If you go into albums and the Inforeign Fields exhibition, it's from Hugh's, I think Hugh's first exhibition on the Longford soldiers. You can see them all behind them there with their fine moustaches. But it was a very special evening in that Freddie, Brady Brown and Mickey Riley were both able to attend, and I was able to get some photographs of both of them. You know, Freddie was talking to everybody because he turns up in quite a few photographs. talking to literally everybody there. And I think it's just really special that we have these two gentlemen that everybody remembers with great fondness together. And thank you to Hugh for bringing them together and bringing us together and actually illuminating this subject. Something that hadn't really been covered as much, certainly in other counties. And it's a great resource to have, and we're so lucky to have Hugh and to have people like Father Tom Murray, who provided all of the photographs of the graves of the great war soldiers that you see in the Longford at War database. And then, of course, we have support from David Leahy and lots of other people with an interest in the subject.
I think I've said all we said about the Second World War men from this evening. But if anyone out there has any information on anyone, you can contact me, send me all the information, and I'll start digging. And we'll find out more on it.
So again, thank you so much for joining us all. It was a pleasure to have you all here, and it was especially to have Hugh here sharing his knowledge on just some of the people that we know about from County Longford or with a strong Longford connection who served in World War II. So all you do is wrap up, and thank you again and good night.